What if the most important political debate in American history was also the funniest argument two groups of brilliant men ever had while wearing wigs and pretending they weren't absolutely terrified of each other? Because that is essentially what happened in 1787, and nobody talks about it this way, and honestly, that is a crime against both history and entertainment. Welcome to the greatest political roast that never got a laugh track. So here is the setup. America has just survived a revolution. The ink on the Declaration of Independence is barely dry. The country is basically a collection of 13 states who agreed on one thing, which was that Britain was annoying and almost nothing else. Someone needed to figure out how this whole republic thing was actually going to work. Enter the Federalist Papers, a collection of essays that were essentially 85 very long, very passionate arguments for why everyone needed to calm down and trust a stronger central government. Federalist Number 4, specifically written by John Jay, tackled foreign policy and national security. And the anti-federalists looked at all of this and said, absolutely not. We would rather argue forever, thank you. Now here is where the satire writes itself. John Jay sits down to write Federalist 4 and makes this beautifully logical argument. He says, look, nations do not just go to war because of legitimate grievances. They go to war because they want your stuff, because they are jealous, because some king woke up feeling dramatic that morning. One unified national government, he argued, creates one unified military response. One voice in foreign negotiations, one coherent defense strategy. It is honestly the geopolitical equivalent of saying, if we all show up to the argument together, nobody is picking a fight with us at the lunch table. The anti-federalists, bless their hearts, heard all of this and essentially said, but what if the federal government became the thing we are scared of? And this is where you have to appreciate the absolute comedic tension of the moment. Both sides were right. Both sides were terrified. Both sides were also, and this is the part history books forget to mention, operating with almost no historical blueprint for what a constitutional republic even looked like at this scale. They were inventing the airplane while standing on a cliff, and they were arguing about the wing design on the way down. The anti-federalists, writing under brilliant pseudonyms like Brutus and Federal Farmer, were not idiots. They were actually raising genuinely important concerns. A standing army could become tyrannical. A distant federal government might not represent local interests. Power concentrated anywhere tends to corrupt everywhere. These were not paranoid fever dreams. These were lessons written in the blood of every collapsed republic before theirs. But here is the thing that makes this whole debate almost poetic in its irony. Both the Federalists and the anti-federalists were trying to do the right thing when nobody was looking. And I mean that literally. John Jay wrote Federalist 4 under the name Publius. Hamilton wrote most of them under the same name. Madison, too. These were not branding exercises. These were men who genuinely believed the argument mattered more than the credit. That is integrity in its purest form. Doing the right thing when no one is watching, when no one even knows your name is attached to the work. When the only thing driving you is the belief that you owe future generations your very best thinking. The anti-federalists did the same thing. Patrick Henry stood up in Virginia and argued against ratification, knowing it might cost him politically. He did not care. He cared about the principle. These were statesmen, not politicians. And the difference between those two things might be the most important distinction in all of American civic life. A politician asks, what will get me re-elected? A statesman asks, what will outlast me? Politicians perform for the crowd. Statesmen argue with posterity looking over their shoulder. John Jay was not writing for 1787. He was writing for this moment, for us, for every generation that would have to live inside the architecture of the decision being made. The constitutional republic they were building was not a democracy in the raw, unfiltered, everyone votes on everything sense. It was a system of deliberate friction. Checks and balances were not a design flaw. They were the entire point. The founders had read enough history to know that unchecked power, even democratic power, even power held by the genuinely well-intentioned, eventually curdles into something unrecognizable. And so they built a system that would argue with itself. permanently, by design. The Federalists and anti-federalists were not enemies. They were the system working exactly as intended. The tension between federal authority and state sovereignty, between national security and individual liberty, that tension is not a bug. It is the operating system. Here is the payoff, and I want you to sit with this for a second. We live in a moment where political discourse often feels like performance art, with worse costumes and no actual arguments. We have inherited the most sophisticated political framework ever constructed, built by people who were genuinely afraid of getting it wrong, who wrote under fake names because the idea mattered more than the glory, who argued furiously and then shook hands because they understood that the republic was the point, not the victory. John Jay warning about foreign powers exploiting divided nations in 1787 sounds like a man who had access to a newspaper from any year in the last 50. The anti-federalists warning about concentrated power sounds like someone who read this morning's headlines and had feelings about it. The wit in all of this is not the jokes. The wit is the recognition that these arguments never ended. They just changed costumes. The Federalist and the anti-federalist are both still in the room every time Americans debate what government should do and what it should leave alone. The question they are both still asking, the one John Jay was really asking in Federalist 4, is this: can free people govern themselves well enough, consistently enough, and honestly enough when no one is grading them? That is not a question about 1787. That is the question. And the answer, for better or for worse, is still being written. Help us restore our republic. Vote Rachel Fox for U.S. Senate this November 3rd.